Hello and welcome to computer programming. All right, so today's lesson is going to involve functions and parameters. And to do that, we're going to need to get this file under the Old MacDonald lab. So again, just a reminder, everything's zipped up into one file. So when you click on the zip file, it's going to open this window that's not useful to us. Instead, we're going to click on these three dots, choose Open in New Window. All right, it's going to open it in this window, and now we're going to have this download icon that we're looking for. All right, so this will download it straight to our computer. Now, there's a good chance that you're going to get an error here that says, sorry, this file is infected with a virus. It's not actually infected with the virus. I'm hoping you're still going to be able to download it. If not, then we'll find a workaround. But for right now, hopefully you can just click Download Infected File. All right, and then that'll send it down to your computer. Now, just a reminder that it's going to go to your Downloads folder. So if you open up the File Explorer or Windows Explorer down here, and then click on your downloads, you should see that you now have this intro Old MacDonald zip file. We can't use it as a zip file. We have to unzip it. So if we right click, we're going to go extract all. We can just click extract here. And then again, it opens it up in a new window. But before I actually open up the program, I like to kind of clean up my files. So I no longer need the zipped version. So I'm going to delete that. All right, and then I'm going to drag this, which has all my program stuff in it, into my computer programming folder just to keep myself more organized. And then I can go inside there and open it up. Now, the file that Google is identifying as a virus is this Old MacDonald solution. And this is something I'm just going to start trying to do. But basically, it's a finished version of the program. So you can always use this to see what the output should look like. Again, it's saying Windows protected your PC because it thinks it's a virus. But if you click on this More Info, you should then get this Run Anyway button. And then it'll run it just so that you can see what the final output is supposed to look like. All right, so I'm going to do this going forward, assuming we can actually download all these. If not, then we'll find a workaround. But right now, this is just, it doesn't show you the code, but it shows you what the final output should look like. Now, getting back to the code itself, let's open up the project file, which again is the one with the code blocks icon. It should say project file over here, and it says lab1 Old MacDonald. Do not open main.cpp. All right, that's the file that you'll eventually attach when you submit the project. But when we're opening it, we open this project file right here. All right, and that should open up code blocks. And again, the code should come right up, but if it doesn't, you can use this Explorer window over here on the left-hand side. If you're not on the Projects tab, you can use these arrows to get over to the Projects tab, and then in the Sources folder, if you click on that plus sign, you should see main.cpp, and if you double-click on that, the code should come right up. All right, so if we look at this, and we run it, you can see that basically this is a program that prints out Old MacDonald. So if you're not familiar with it, Old MacDonald had a farm, E-I-E-I-O, and on this farm he had a cow, E-I-E-I-O, with a moo-moo here and a moo-moo there. Here a moo, there a moo, everywhere a moo-moo. Old MacDonald had a farm, E-I-E-I-O. Okay. So, I think that's pretty self-explanatory. Just kidding. All right, so what we're going to do today is we're going to learn how to set up functions. Now, one of the main things we've been talking about is that in computer science, you're really sort of trying to break down larger programs or larger problems into individual steps. All right, functions allow us to do something similar. It's going to allow us to break down our program into smaller pieces still. All right, so that's still this idea of breaking things down, but we started off just by saying, all right, here's the problem. Let's break it down into a single program. Now we're going to take that program and break it down into smaller parts. All right, and one of the reasons we do this is because those parts can then be reused in other programs and in other places inside of our program. All right, we want to try to avoid writing the same code over and over and over again. If we need to do the same thing multiple times in a program, we can create a function, and then we just tell that function to run every time we need to use the code. All right, so that's kind of what the main gist of today is, and we're going to do it and talk about it using the song Old MacDonald. All right, so again, just some review here. Up at the top, we have some include statements. IO stream lets us use the console. This include string is going to become relevant later, but that's going to give us access to a new type of variable that we're going to use. And then include cstd lib is like the CS standard lib, and that gives us like the system pause command, which is what makes this press any key to continue show up at the bottom of our program. All right, so just a few things there, but let's get to the main gist of the lesson. So functions give us a way to sort of avoid repeating code over and over and over again. So if we take a look at our song here, we might notice that E-I-E-I-O gets repeated several times. All right, it's said there, it's said there, it's said right there. All right, so what we might want to do is we might want to create a function that prints out E-I-E-I-O. All right, that way we don't have to keep writing the code. We can just use our function anytime we want to say E-I-E-I-O. All right, so when we create a function, we're going to go down below our int main. And for right now, we're going to start with the word void. All right, and you don't have to worry about what the word void means quite yet, but we're just going to start with the word void. And then we're going to give our function a name. And again, it follows a lot of the same rules as like a variable. It can have a number in it, but it can't start with a number. There are certain keywords, or if I tried to make a function called if, that would create problems. But for the most part, you can sort of name your function whatever you want. So I'm going to call this one E-I-E-I-O. And then functions are always followed with a left and a right parenthesis. Now, sometimes there's additional stuff that's going to go inside of these parentheses, but for our very first function, we're just going to leave them empty. All right. Then we're going to hit enter, and we're going to make a left and a right curly brace, which marks the start and the end of the code for our function. So the entire function that we end up writing is going to be contained inside of these curly braces. Now, all I'm going to put inside of here is the code that prints out E-I-E-I-O. So I'm going to type in cout, less than, I'm going to type in my quotations, and then I'm going to type in E-I-E-I-O with 2 exclamation points, just like it was up above. And then this \n is an escape sequence or an escape character, and that basically makes it so I hit the enter key. It's another way of forcing the console to like start a new line. So I'm just putting this in here, and then I'm hitting my semicolon, and now I have a function that can print out the phrase E-I-E-I-O. All right? So what I could do is I could go up to my code here, and instead of repeatedly typing in E-I-E-I-O, I could call my E-I-E-I-O function. So that's what I'm going to do. All right, I'm going to go and I'm going to delete out this part right here. All right, so I've got Old MacDonald had a farm, comma, space. I'm going to put a semicolon here to mark the end of the line. And then I'm going to call my E-I-E-I-O function. Now, when I call a function, I use its name, but I leave off the void part. So its name is E-I-E-I-O. Capitalization matters. And then I do need the left and the right parenthesis. And again, for right now, those are just going to be empty. And then I've got a semicolon at the end. So this is basically saying, see out, Old MacDonald had a farm, and then call the EIEI function, which basically means go down and run this code that's down here. Right? So when the program gets to this line, it's going to say, okay, I'm supposed to run this other little program called EIEIO. Let me jump down here. Let me run this code. And then when it's done, I'll go back to what I was doing up here. Now, because I ended this cout statement, I now have to go and put cout right here again to pick it back up. But let's see what happens. All right, so if I try to build and run this, I'm actually going to get an error. And the error is going to say EIEIO was not declared in this scope. So what does that mean? All right. When the compiler is going through your program, it goes through it top to bottom. So when it gets to line 9, it sees this EIEIO, and it's like, I've got no idea what that is. What is that gibberish? So it throws up an error. It doesn't realize that you've created a function EIEIO down here on line 20. So the way we get around that is something called a function declaration. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to copy this line 20. I'm going to go up above my int main, but below my using namespace standard. So I'm going to hit enter a few times to give myself some space. And then I'm going to paste in the name of my function and put in a semicolon. All right. And this is what's called a function declaration. And basically, it just lets the compiler know that, hey, a function has been created called EIEIO. So if you see it anywhere in the main function, don't worry. It's supposed to be there. Everything is totally fine. All right. So now when I try to compile this, all right, it's going to be fine. It's not going to give me an error. And the output is going to look exactly the same as it did before. And that's kind of the point. All right. The function didn't change anything. It just, changed what's happening behind the scenes. It changed the structure, and it gave us access to something we can use over and over and over again. All right. So now that we know that this works, let's use it over and over and over again. So I'm going to go and replace all my EIEIOs. So again, delete it out there, hit semicolon, call EIEIO. Add a cout right here. Go down here. Again, delete out the EIEIO. And then call my function again. All right. So I just keep calling the function over and over and over again. And it keeps going down and reusing this code instead of me having to write the code again and again and again. I've now only wrote EIEIO once. I've just called it and told it to run on 3 separate occasions. And when I run the program, you're not going to notice a difference, but it is structured different behind the scenes. All right, so let's see if we can break this program down even a little further. All right, so where's a little more repetition? All right, we also have this phrase, Old MacDonald had a farm. All right, so let's create a new function called void, and I'm going to call this one hadda for had a farm. All right, and I'm going to make this again left and right parentheses empty. I'm going to hit enter. I'm going to make my left and right curly brace, and inside of this, I'm going to take both line 10 and 11 here, and I'm going to copy these. I'm going to paste them both down inside of hadda here. All right. So what we're seeing here is that one function is actually going to be able to call another function. So when I use the hadda function, it's going to print out Old MacDonald had a farm. Then it's going to call the EIEIO function, and that's going to print out the phrase EIEIO. All right. So we can even start kind of stringing our functions together to gain even greater efficiencies. So again, I've made a new function void hadda, all right? It prints out Old MacDonald had a farm, and then it calls the EIEIO function. So because I made a new function, I'm going to add the declaration up above. So again, it's basically just this top line here, or the function signature. I'm going to paste it there, and I'm going to add a semicolon. So now the compiler knows that I've created two functions, one called EIEIO, one called hadda. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to delete out lines 11 and 12, and instead I'm just going to call hadda, because that will print out this and then call this function, which will print out this part. Okay? And then I'm going to do the same thing down here on line 17. I'm going to delete this out. I'm going to call hadda. And then because I deleted out those two lines, I need to go back up here now and add a semicolon. Otherwise, I'm going to get an error. All right. So let's try to run it now and see what happens. All right. Now you should notice that it looks exactly the same. And again, that's the point. All right. We want it to look exactly the same. We just want it structured differently behind the scenes so that we, the coders, don't have to do quite as much work. All right. Generally, we're very lazy when it comes to writing programs, and we want to write as little code as possible. All right. So on that topic, let's see if we can go even further. All right. Now, this next part isn't so much about repetition. It's about flexibility. All right. Because this line right here, it doesn't repeat. All right. But those of you familiar with the Old MacDonald song know that occasionally you change out the animal. All right. It's not always a cow. Sometimes it's a duck. Sometimes it's a cat. Sometimes it's a dog. Sorry, I'm having a really hard time keeping a straight face. So we want to make our program a little more flexible. All right, so we're going to do that by creating a function that can work especially with this line here. All right, so we've got, and on this farm, he had a cow. All right, so we're going to create a function called void on this. Now, what's going to be different about this function is we're not going to leave these parentheses empty. Instead, we're going to provide what's called a parameter. All right, so when we create a parameter, we have to say what the type of the parameter is. And our parameter is going to be a string, which again is why we have this include string. All right, but that's going to be a variable that lets us have like an entire word. So this string is going to be able to hold a word, and we're going to call it animal. So when I set up this parameter, it's basically like I've created a variable called animal. All right. The only difference is I didn't create it down in my program. I created it up here in my function header, and it's called a parameter because it's inside of these parentheses here. And again, we'll see why that's useful in a second. All right. But otherwise, I'm going to have my braces, right, just like I did before. So there's my curly braces. And I'm going to take this line, and on this farm, he had a cow. And I'm going to copy it, and I'm going to bring it down here, and I'm going to paste it. Now, what's going to be different is instead of actually using the word cow, I'm going to use my variable. So after I have the word a, I'm going to close my quotes. I'm going to use my output operator, which is the two less than signs. I'm going to use the name of my variable, which is animal. Then I'm going to use the output operator again, which is two more less than signs, and I'm going to start my quotes back up. So this is saying now print out, and on this farm he had a, and then look inside of this variable animal to know what to actually plug in here, and then print out the comma and the space. Right. So because this function has a parameter, when we call it, it's going to be a little different. All right, but before we even call it, let's put the declaration up top so we don't forget that later on. All right. So the declaration includes the parameter. It's basically exactly the same thing that's down here. They have to match, otherwise you're going to get an error. So usually I write this and then I just copy and paste it so that I'm sure it matches exactly. Now, when I call this, I'm going to call my function on this, but then I have to provide a value that's then going to get placed in this variable animal. So I'm going to put inside of quotes the word cow. And what this is effectively doing is when I call this function, it's taking the value cow and it's placing it in the variable animal. So it's almost like I have a line in my program that string animal equals cow, only I don't have to explicitly write this line. It happens automatically. All right, the program knows to take this, send it in, and place it in this new variable animal that's created. So this isn't explicit, like it happens, just we don't have to like explicitly type it out. Right, so now I have this, which is again, when I run the program, it should look exactly the same. It's just now it's plugging in the word cow for us. Right? What did I goof up? Oh, I forgot my semicolon here. Right, so when I run this now, you're going to see it looks exactly the same. But if I go in here and change this to duck, you're going to see that when I run it, it automatically plugs in duck. But I think we all know a duck doesn't moo, so this is a ridiculous program, and I apologize for that. All right, so let's change it back to cow, because I am nothing but serious. All right, so we're going to now do the same thing for the sounds here. All right, so we're going to make another function called void with a. And this time we're going to make a string variable called sound. All right, still going to have my curly braces. And now I'm going to take this part right up here. I'm going to copy and paste it down into my with a function. And everywhere I see the word moo, I'm going to replace that with my variable sound. All right, so this is going to take a little bit, but I'm going to close my quotes after the with a space. Then I'm going to type in sound less than less than. Now I have to start my quotes back up to get the space in there. So I've done my less than I've said print out the variable sound. I've done my less than again. Then I'm going back to regular text so that I can get a space in there. And then I'm going back to my variable so that I can get that sound again. And then I'm going back to regular text so I can get the space and the word here. All right. So I'm basically going to keep doing that over and over and over again. So down here, I've got my and. I'm going to close the quotes, put in sound, go back to text, put in a space, go back to variables, type in sound, go back to text, put in my quotes, and then get my space there. And then the same thing down here. I'm going to have to do it 1, 2, 3, 4 more times. All right, so end my quotes, less than sound, less than, start my quotes back up. Where am I? Whoops, what did I do here? All right, get rid of that word moo. That's what I goofed up. All right, so hear a sound, less than, back to my quotes, comma, there, all right, again, close my quotes, less than, sound, less than, start my quotes back up, and then I can delete out moo, because that's what this sound variable is doing. And then the same thing over here, everywhere moo moo. Close my quotes, put in the variable sound, go back to text, put in a space, go back to variable, put in sound again, go back to regular text, and put my new line sequence in there. All right. So again, if you just want to kind of see this all in one spot here, that might make it easier. We've got with and then we're printing out the variable sound. Then we're going back to put in a space. Then we're putting sound again. And then the rest of the line, same thing here. And then same thing here. We just keep putting in the variable sound everywhere in the song that it needs to go. All right. So now that we have this one, we can go back up to our original main program, and we can call, oh, did I put with up here yet? I did not, so let's make sure we do that. Take my function, I'm going to copy the header here, paste it up here. So there's my function declaration so that it knows that it exists. And I'm going to delete this out. And I'm going to create my with and I'm going to send it moo. Right? Put my semicolon there. And now when I run this, it should look exactly the same as it's always looked, but obviously the code behind it is quite different now. All right, this is the moment of truth to see if I made a mistake. Nope, I think I did all right. So Old MacDonald had a farm, E-I-E-I-O, and on this farm he had a cow, E-I-E-I-O, with a moo-moo here and a moo-moo there, here moo, there moo, everywhere moo-moo. Old MacDonald had a farm, E-I-E-I-O. All right, so same thing it's always been, but now it's been broken down into all of these different functions. And by use of these parameters, I can very quickly change this. So if I wanted to be duck and quack, all I had to do was change that parameter. And then when I run it, my program is instantly updated, and now it works with ducks and quacks, or it works with dogs and woofs, whatever I want it to, very quickly can have it up and running. Now, this is pretty good, but we can go one step further. All right, so what we're going to do is we're going to make a function called void full song. Now, when we're doing the full song, we need two pieces of information. We need the animal and the sound. So we're going to give this two parameters. We're going to say string animal, comma, string sound. All right, so this function has two parameters, which means when I call it, it needs two pieces of information. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take all of this, which is the full song. I'm going to copy it, and I'm going to bring it down here and paste it in. Now, the only change I'm going to make is instead of typing in dog, I'm going to put in my variable animal. All right, that's not the word animal, it's the variable, because I'm not using quotations. All right, so the program is going to know that that's referring to the variable animal. And then I'm going to do the same thing here. I'm going to replace woof with sound. Now you might be asking yourself, wait, is it okay to have a variable animal here and a variable animal here? And are they different? Are they the same? It is okay because variables have what's called scope, which means they only exist where you created them. So this variable animal exists inside of this function, but it doesn't exist outside of this function. All right, this variable sound exists in this function. It doesn't exist outside of it. And this variable animal exists inside of this function, but not outside of it. So the fact that I have two variables called animal is fine because this one only exists down here and this one only exists up here. So there's no conflict, there's no overlap. All right. So anyways, now I've got this variable, I've got full song. And what I can do now is I can call my function full song. It's expecting two parameters. All right. Now, it doesn't know what's an animal and what's a sound. It does it based on order. All right. So because I put the parameter animal first, I want to provide my animal first. So I'm going to start with dog. I separate my different parameters with commas. So I'm going to have a comma in there. And then I'm going to put in my sound. And again, I'll put in woof there. So I've now reduced the whole song to a single line of code. And what happens is when this function gets called, it sends these two values, dog and woof, down to full song. Animal gets the value dog in it. So again, it's basically like I did this. Right? The variable sound gets the value woof in it. Again, it's like I did this. It's just happening automatically. So I don't actually want this code here. This is just what's happening. All right. So those two variables have those values in them. And then it's basically, I just keep passing them along. So this has the value dog in it. This has the value woof in it, which then get passed along to these other functions. So sound will end up with woof in it. Animal up here will end up with dog in it. I just keep passing them along to the different functions. But I now have the entire song represented as just this one line of code that then calls a series of functions to achieve everything it wants to. Now, before this will work, I got to make sure I put my declaration up top here. Let me put my declaration up top there. And then if I build and run this, you'll see that it prints out the whole song with just that single line of code. And better yet, if I wanted to print out several verses, I could now reduce this to just saying, all right, let me just see out an end L so that there's a space between them. And then I could call it again and say duck, quack. And then let me put a space in between it. And I could call it again and say cat, meow. And I didn't have to repeat my code. I didn't have to type it all out. I just called this function. I sent it the values. It plugged those values in. And I get all this output. There's the dog verse. There's the duck verse. There's the cat verse with just these 3 lines of code. All right. So again, functions allow us to kind of break down our programs into individual purposes or tasks, and then we can reuse those tasks again and again and again without having to rewrite any code. All right, and we can keep condensing it down so that our main function is really just calling various functions that carry out the purpose or the goals of the program. Right, and again, this has all sorts of advantages. It makes things more reusable. If you're working on a program as part of a group, like your job might just be to write a single function, and then other people can use those functions to achieve their goals, and you can use other people's functions to help you write your function, and so on and so forth. But it all sort of fits together as a big puzzle. All right, so what are you going to be doing today? All right, you're going to be doing something similar, but for a different song. All right, you're going to be doing it for the song Apples and Bananas. Now, if you're not familiar with the song Apples and Bananas, head over to YouTube. I would recommend choosing the Raffi version. I mean, he's a children's song superstar. But search for Apples and Bananas songs. You'll get lots of results. But it's basically the one there. You keep plugging in different vowels. So I like to eat apples and bananas, apples and bananas. I like to eat apples and bananas. I like to eat apples and bananas. I like to oat opals and bananas. I like to oot opals and bananas. All right. So you're going to be writing a program that basically prints out these 5 lines. All right. Basically prints out the song Apples and Bananas. All right. Now, to do this, you're going to be writing 2 separate functions. All right. The first function is going to be called fruit verse. All right. It's going to take a single parameter called value, so like string vowel. And this function's job is to print out a single line of the song. So this function is only going to print out a single line, but it's going to plug in the correct vowel here, 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 and then 3 different spots in the words bananas. So it's going to be just like what we did down here with the with a function, only you're going to be plugging in the vowel into the appropriate part of the verse. Right? The second function that you're going to write is going to be called fruit song. It's not going to have any parameters, and its only job is to call fruit verse 5 separate times, passing in a different variable each time. All right, so it's going to be kind of like what we just did up here. It's going to keep calling fruit verse, but it's going to call it with an A, and then an E, and then an I, and then an O, and then a U. So when you're done, in your main, you're just going to have one call to what did I name it? Full song or fruit song? Yeah, fruit song. All right, you're going to have one call to fruit song, and that one call should print out the entire song. All right, so again, you'll be making new functions down here, fruit verse and fruit song. So void fruit verse, void fruit song. And then in your main, you're going to have a single call to fruit song that's going to print out the whole thing. All right, so that's sort of the goal for today. Now, normally I have you comment out your old code. With these functions, we don't have to waste our time commenting them out. All right, if you don't call the function, they don't run. So we can comment out this stuff. All right, we could do the /* we could do the */ to end the comment. All right, we can turn this into a comment, but there's no reason to comment out all this other stuff, because if we don't call those functions, they don't run. All right, the only thing that runs when we run our program is the int main. So if there's no calls to those functions inside of int main, they just sit there and they don't cause us any problems. All right, so we don't have to comment these out. We can just leave them be. But you are going to have to add 2 new functions, and then you're going to have to add a call to that function inside of the main. So really, your main is only going to have one line in it that's going to call your other functions that's going to print out the entire song. All right, so I hope this was helpful. Obviously, if you have any questions, let me know. Otherwise, best of luck, and we'll go from there. All right.